Well, thank you very much for allowing me to bring God's word to you this morning. Let's turn to 2 Samuel chapter 6. 2 Samuel chapter 6 verse 1. Reading. David again gathered all the chosen men of Israel, 30,000. And David arose and went with all the people who were with him from Baal-Judah, to bring up from there the ark of God, which is called by the name of the Lord of hosts, who sits enthroned on the cherubim. And they carried the ark of God on a new cart, and brought it out of the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill. And Uzzah and Ahio, the sons of Abinadab, were driving the new cart with the ark of God, and Ahio went before the ark. And David and all the house of Israel were celebrating before the Lord with songs, lyres, harps, tambourines, and castanets and cymbals. And when they came to the threshing floor of Uzzah put out his hand to the ark of God, and took hold of it, for the oxen stumbled. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Uzzah, and God struck him down there because of his error, and he died there beside the ark of God. And David was angry because the Lord had broken out against Uzzah, and that place is called Perez Uzzah to this day. And David was afraid of the Lord that day, and he said, "How can the ark of the Lord come to me?" So David was not willing to take the ark of the Lord into the city of David, but David took it aside to the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite. And the ark of the Lord remained in the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite 3 months. And the Lord blessed Obed-Edom and all his household. And it was told King David, the Lord had blessed the household of Obed-Edom and all that belongs to him because of the ark of God. So David went and brought up the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David with rejoicing. And when those who bore the ark of the Lord had gone 6 steps, he sacrificed an ox and a fattened animal. And David danced before the Lord with all his might. And David was wearing a linen ephod. So David and all the house of Israel brought up the ark of the Lord with shouting and with the sound of the horn. We thank the Lord for his word to us this morning. I'm sure you've read this several times. There's probably a couple of people in here done PhDs on this particular reading. But just to remind ourselves the timeline of where we are this morning. 1 Samuel chapter 4, the Philistines capture the ark in battle. And the ark is used as a kind of charm by this time. Eli's 2 sons, his 2 evil sons, are killed in battle. 1 Samuel chapter 6, the ark returns to Israel after God's judgment on the Philistines. When they captured it, they foolishly took it into the temple of Dagon, that big fish-type god, small g. And of course, when the ark was in there, all alone, when they'd shut the door, Dagon fell on his face before the ark. And God's judgment came upon the people of the Philistines, and he sent tumors upon them, and mice, a terrible plague of mice. 2 Samuel chapter 5, David is anointed king of Israel over the 12 tribes, and he takes the stronghold of Zion from the Jebusites and calls it his own. 2 Samuel 5:17, David defeats the Philistines in battle, and this is where we are up to this present day, according to the reading. The ark had been in the house of Abinadab for a long time, about 20 years. What was it doing there, I wonder? I wonder if it was in a barn or in a corner, covered up with an old sheet or something. All the time that the ark was missing from the tabernacle was still in place. This tabernacle was still being used as a place of worship without the ark. The religion was still going. The priests were still doing their business without the ark. And what we know about the ark is when the ark is in its proper place, that's where God was. God met his people with the ark, in the ark, between the cherubim. Right from the word go, that's where God was to be found in the midst of Israel, was in the ark, round the ark. He spoke to Moses in the ark, between the cherubim. But for years, in fact, lots of years, Israel worshipped without the ark being present. Really? Israel worshipped without the ark being present. Religion with no God. Religion with no God. It is a blight to the West, especially Britain. And if you care about where we stay, especially Scotland, religion with no God. Religion with no Christ. And you say, well, come on, David, this is too much. You've taken that too far. That wee house that we are going to live in, God willing, when we retire, a wee flat in Skelmerley in the west coast. It's got a big Church of Scotland about half a mile from it. I thought I'd go there one summer's morning. I just walked. Congregation of about 170, 180. And they brought in the Bible, big huge Bible. It's a big huge guy that brought it in. And he took it away up to the pulpit. And there was a reading. And the minister went up. And he preached on recycling. Because that particular week was recycling week in Inverclyde. There's no mention of God, no mention of Christ, or him crucified. He spoke for 15 minutes on how to recycle. Religion with no God. And you say, well, how can that be possible? Well, it is possible. And count yourself blessed when someone comes up to this platform and actually preaches the Word of God. Because there's many, many, many people this morning sitting in churches just looking like this who are hearing religion with no God. And this is what the Israelites were going through. No God, religion, priests, ministers doing their duty without God. Scotland today is a place of religion with no God. I was watching the television the other night, and Norwich Cathedral, did you see it on the news? Norwich Cathedral, a lovely big cathedral. I've actually been in it. It's a lovely big building. And they've erected a helter-skelter in the church. A proper, all singing, all dancing, helter-skelter in the church to try and attract people into the church. Another, Woolwich, I think it is, cathedral, has put a crazy golf inside the church. If you go on the internet, you'll be able to see it. Religion with no God. 2 Samuel chapter 6, David decides to bring the Ark of God back to his newly appointed capital, Jerusalem, which was a good and honourable thing to do. It was the right thing to do. But in the light of what we have read this morning, of what we know, what was the reason behind this? What was the reason behind the decision to bring the Ark of God back to Jerusalem? Was it to glorify God? Was it for his own ego? Don't forget, he had just been made king of all Israel. He just defeated the Philistines. He was on a high. And sometimes when men are on a high, they only think of themselves. I think there are maybe two reasons. One of them was because he thought it was the right thing to do. Perhaps it was God-honouring. Perhaps he had an oversized ego, making decisions which are right, but for the wrong reasons. Coming to church. Coming to church is, in some cases, the right thing to do. But sometimes for the wrong reasons. Now, I went to church several times, more than several times. It was the right thing to do, going to church. But in my case, it was completely for the wrong reasons. I went because my wife, Kay, told me to go. She thought it was a good idea if I was to go. And I said yes. And I sat with the people when the people sat. I stood with the people when the people stood. I sang the songs that the people sang. I listened to the man, whatever he said. I did all the things, but for the wrong reasons. Now, surely I can't be the only one in the whole of Christendom who went to church, which is a right thing to do, for the wrong reason. Surely no. Giving. Giving is the right thing to do. It's what we do. But sometimes it's for the wrong reasons. Serving. Serving is the right thing to do in church, in your community. But what's the real reason that you do it? Is it because you're just asked to do it? Is it because you want to do it because you look good? What's the real reason? What's the real reason that we do things in this Christian environment? Matthew 6, 1-5, Jesus says, Beatitudes, beware of practicing your righteousness before other people. You see, it's the right thing to do. But it's the wrong reason, perhaps, that you're doing it. Beware of practicing your righteousness before there are people in order to be seen by them. It's that Pharisaical attitude when they stood in the corner with all their holy gear on and their nice square beards, looking good, but their hearts were rotten inside. But they looked the part. They wanted to appear good before the people. Galatians 1:10, for am I seeking the approval of man or God? Or am I trying to please men? Paul is asking himself, why am I doing this? What's the real reason that I do this? Is it because I want to please men? Or am I doing it to please God? There's no mention here of David seeking the approval of God to move this ark from Abinadab's house to his own stronghold in Jerusalem. Nothing. And it's not as if he's never done it before. 2 Samuel 2:1. If you've got a Bible, just flick a couple of pages over and we'll see how he does it. After this, David inquired of the Lord, shall I go up into any of the cities of Judah? And the Lord said to him, go up. Shall I go? David asks. 2 Samuel chapter 5:3, on the same page as what we are. Chapter 5, verse 3, and all the elders of Israel came to the king at Hebron, and King David made a covenant with them at Hebron before the Lord. Chapter 5, verse 19. And David inquired of the Lord, shall I go up against the Philistines? Shall I go, Lord? Yes. Shall I go, Lord? No. Shall I go, Lord? Just stay there. But there's nothing here of inquiring of the Lord. It's the right thing to do. It's a good thing to do. Bring the ark from that house, an old dusty sheet, and bring it to the city of God. It's the right thing to do. Is he doing it with the right attitude? The attitude of worship to God. So we have to ask ourselves, what spiritual condition was David in when he made this decision? Moving the ark of God. Big responsibility. And David personally took charge of the operation. It's the problem. It's an operation. Instead of coming to the Lord in prayer and worship, he treated it like a military operation. Here he's got his commanders of the army head on. He's not thinking of the Lord at all. It seems David has forgotten the Bible. Numbers chapter 4. First thing, the ark had to be covered. The ark was never to be seen by men. Second, the ark had not to be touched. This is in Numbers chapter 4. You can read it this afternoon when you go home. Exodus 37:3. 4 rings were specially made and fitted onto the ark, and 2 poles were especially made to go through the 4 rings so that they could carry the ark. The ark was to be carried. It's in plain English or Hebrew. It was plain. All he had to do was read it. All he has to do was remember it. That's all he had to do. But he was too busy. Too busy thinking about castanets and cymbals and people who were going to be there, 30,000 invites. Too busy thinking about other things. But it was the right thing to do. Exodus 37:3, 4 rings made of gold and 2 poles made to go through the rings to carry the ark. It seems so simple. All he had to do was inquire of the Lord. And how many times in my life, never mind you, how many times in my life do I make huge decisions without inquiring of the Lord? How many times? Sometimes on a daily basis, when I make massive decisions and I don't inquire of the Lord, and then I wonder how it all goes wrong. How many times in your life? And you think, well, I'm only buying a car, or I'm only going on holiday, or I'm only just doing something. I don't need to ask the Lord. I don't need to read the Bible to see what the Lord's saying. I'll just make my own decision. It's the right thing to do. It's a nice car, it's a nice house, it's a nice holiday, it's a nice gift. But what's the reason? What's the reason? The ark had to be carried. Why? Because God said it. The ark had to be carried because God said it. The ark hadn't to be looked at because God said it. The last time the ark was on a cart was when the Philistines captured it. And he took it back to Dagon. And it was a disaster. And he put it on a new cart with 2 milk cows, and they couldn't get rid of it quick enough. They suffered because the ark was put on a cart and touched and looked at, because they didn't understand the holiness behind the ark, the holiness of God. The holiness. This is the whole point. God is holy, and he meets his people in the ark, with the ark, round the ark, in the presence of the ark. Holiness. Don't touch it. I am holy. Don't look at it, because I am holy. Don't come into the presence unless you're told to come in. Why? Because I am holy. Only those who are privileged ever get near the ark. Only those. And when they did, they went with fear and trembling into the Holy of Holies, past the curtain, into the holiness of God. I wonder this morning, I say this every Sunday at the wee hut in Gorgie Mission Church. What attitude have you came tonight? I say to them. Did you come with the attitude of meeting God who is holy? Or did you just run out the door? Did you just run out the door and come in? The ark went before the people. It's where God met the people. Exodus 25:22 says, there and only there will I meet you. The ark is where the people met with God. And when we think of the ark, we know that this is a type of Christ, because we can only know God through Christ. We can only know this God who is holy. I don't know any words to describe it. I'm sure there's somebody very clever here could put me right and say, this is how holy God is, David. But God is holy. And the only way that we can meet this holy God is through Christ Jesus. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one, this is the bit they always miss out at the funerals. No one comes to the Father except through me. So many people, I meet them on a daily basis. I talked to one yesterday. I was down in Skelmerley yesterday. Somebody flooded our kitchen, but that's got nothing to do with anything. I spoke to this man. I gave him a book. He read it, my wee book. He read it. He says, David, I am a Christian. Now this is true. I will quote him verbatim. David, I am a Christian. I don't believe in God or any of that stuff, but I'm a Christian. Now that's no funny. The poor man thinks he knows God through his own mind, through what he thinks God is. Just something, a word. He doesn't understand the holiness of God. And so many people, popular misconception that people know God their own way without Christ. My 3 sisters, my daughters, my neighbours, all these soldiers, all the lovely people up in the festival, they've got this idea of God. Without Christ, there is no coming to God. David loaded the ark onto the cart like he was delivering an old sideboard. No thought. Blind to the problem as the ark and the cart moves off from Abinadab's house. 2 good men in charge of the cart. 2 good men. Uzzah and Ahio. I'm sure somebody will tell me that's not the right pronunciation. What can go wrong with bands here, the ark's here, the cart's here, the oxen are here. I've got 2 good men. I've got the dancers, I've got the singers, I've got the guests. Off we go. It's the right thing to do. But there's a disaster. Now, I don't know if you're like me. Hopefully not. But when we read verse 7, and the cart, the oxen stumble and the cart takes a wobble. The natural thing to do, the right thing to do, is to put your hand up to make sure it doesn't fall off the cart. It's the right thing to do. When I first became a Christian, and I'd never read the Bible before I was a Christian, and as I started to read through it, I remember coming to this. What? Uzzah put out his hand and God killed him. Really? That's a terrible thing. He's a good man. He was doing the right thing. He saved the ark from falling off the cart. God, why did you do that to that man? I said. Stupidly. At the time. Not knowing at the time God's holiness. Not knowing at the time how holy God is. Don't look at it. Don't touch it. The problem is we have the wrong view of God. The wrong view. God said to Eve, don't eat the fruit or you'll die. Don't eat it. Why not? Just don't eat it. Don't eat it. God said to Lot's wife, don't look back. What did she do? Don't look back. God says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, everything you've got. What do we do? David was angry with God. Really? God says the wages of sin is death. The wages of sin is death. Woe, I use that word carefully, woe. Woe to ministers who don't preach God's judgment. Woe to ministers who don't preach God's holiness. If you don't understand God's holiness, even though you're a Christian, your life will be chaotic. If you don't understand the holiness of God, how are you going to live the Christian life? How are we going to live that life when we leave the comfort of this church and the comfort of the Christian fellowship where we're all really dead nice to each other? How are we going to live in the scheme? How are we going to live in that place where the guy next door is a drug addict, or the guy next door parks his car in front of your driveway and you get really angry? Or how are you going to live the Christian life wherever you live outside this building without the proper understanding of how holy God is? Matthew 10:28, Jesus says, do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul, but rather fear him, God, who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Do you know, I got a row one time from a really nice guy, and I look up to him. He's a lovely Christian man. He's a free church man. And he said to me one time when I was talking to soldiers, you can't frighten soldiers into heaven. Why not? Why not? Some people think God's nice, God. God's nice. He loves everybody. He won't send anybody to hell. Wrong. The old illustration of the guy in a train track. But it's so true. The guy in a train track, and the train's coming, he's got his back to the train, he's got his earphones on, and the train's coming at 120 miles an hour, and it weighs 600 tons. What are you going to tell the man? Are you just going to let him be crushed to death, or are you going to shout and bawl and push him off the tracks if you can? But God's nice. He won't send anybody to hell. That's the way my sisters talk. I love them dearly. They read the wee book, and all they could say is, all you have to be is good. Popular misconception that will send billions to hell. God is good. God is holy. God is wonderful. God is nice. But no for me. God says, don't touch the ark. Jesus says, if your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. In other words, don't touch it. God says, don't look at the ark. Jesus says, if your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. In other words, don't look at it. Sin is so bad. If you think the Lord is just a nice person, then play with sin. Play with sin, see where it gets you. Verse 9, and David was afraid of the Lord that day. David knew in his heart that he had tried to manipulate the whole day. The whole day was for him. And David witnessed God's judgment and was afraid. I stupidly said one time, I don't fear God, I'm a Christian. I didn't know any better. Oh, I fear God. not as a brutal father, but his holiness. Have I really grasped the holiness of God? And if I did fully grasp the holiness of God, I would fear him. I would be in awe of him, his holiness. David was afraid of God, and he knew that he had blown it. He took the ark to the house of Obed-Edom. It remained there for 3 months, and while it was there, God blessed that household. And David got it. He got it. God's blessing. God's blessing. Where the ark was, God blessed the household. Do you know why? They never touched it, and they never looked at it, and they understood the holiness of God. It seems so simple. Doing the right things, but for the wrong reasons. Every single time we come through these doors, every time, I say this on a Sunday night to the folks, and we know the theology behind God is everywhere. But every single time we come through these doors, we should be coming with the attitude of worship. To worship the one true living God. God. Coming with the right motive. Coming with the right attitude. Coming to meet with God through Jesus Christ, his Son. For me, that's what I want to do. Wherever I go and worship in Inverclyde, I want to go to church where people are. Not to meet them. Not to meet them. I wouldn't be interested if it was just me. I would be quite happy with that. Just me. And coming in to the presence of God. We pray that we all would have that attitude of worship. We thank the Lord for his word to us this morning. Sam?
Thank you, Davie. We're going to turn to sing Psalms to close our service this morning. Psalm 63. Singing from the beginning of the Psalm. Psalm 63 and Sing Psalms, page 80 in our blue books. O God, you are my God alone. I seek your face with eagerness. My soul and body thirst for you in this dry, weary wilderness. We'll stand and sing from the beginning together. O God, you are my God alone.